This is What If I Told You, the event psychology video podcast for event professionals in which Victoria Mady, event consultant and host, talks with the world's top minds in behavioral science, neuroscience, and psychology on how to transform events using insights about human behavior and mind. For more science-based tips, join Event Psychology Club at eventpsychology.gumroad.com. Also, check out Victoria's online course, Event Psychology Lab, at eventpsychology.thinkific.com, which covers key behavioral science concepts and offers research-backed solutions to your event challenges. This course is a unique opportunity to upgrade your industry skills and gain a competitive edge without adding to your already busy schedule. Now, enjoy the conversation.
Hello, I'm Victoria Mady, and this is What If I Told You, the Event Psychology podcast, where I talk all things event psychology, that is how to apply brain science insights in events. Today, I'm chatting with Timothy Caballero, business manager for IFCA International. With a BA in economics, Timothy studied traditional economics before shifting his focus to behavioral science, behavioral economics. He began applying behavioral science in 2020 when he joined a nonprofit as their business manager. He actively uses choice architecture in his work and writes about behavioral design in his spare time. Timothy lives in Michigan with his wife and their 3 children. Welcome, Timothy. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Victoria. I really appreciate being on here, and I'm excited to our talk.
Thank you. As you know, I've been following you for quite some time on LinkedIn, and I noticed that your title there is Choice Architect. It includes Choice Architect. I'd like to start with that. Can you tell me what choice architecture is, and what does a choice architect do?
Yeah, well, really, they do quite a bit, and a simple way to define it is really they design the choices that you interact with. So there's a lot of different ways in which we interact regularly. I mean, one is this computer screen, the layout of the buttons and whatnot, but more common are menus. We go ahead and we go out to eat frequently. Whether you go to a restaurant, you go to fast food, there's so many different kinds of menus. But if you go to a drive-through, let's just say this, there are certain ways that everything is laid out, and they are meant to go ahead and impact your decision. They're meant to go ahead and shift how you order your food. And so that's what choice architecture is. It's going ahead and looking at these choices that you're being given, designing the layout, the hierarchy of it to influence a decision.
Mm-hmm. And so do you think that choice architecture is applicable in events?
Absolutely. And really, it just goes ahead and it's a matter of where you're wanting to apply it. It can be everything from a registration form on a website to coming up to a registration table when you're there and you're giving a layout through your schedule to how you want people to understand, where am I going? What's the room that I have to meet at? When are our breakout times? It's completely applicable, not just in events, but every aspect of your business as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And when we connected, you mentioned that event planning is part of your job. So let me ask you, what type of events do you do?
Yeah, well, typically what I go ahead and I help out with is we have a large one single year. We have a part of our nonprofit. And essentially what we do is we invite them all for just a time of relaxing. It's a little break away from life. And so there's some seminars that go on, some breakout sessions, but really it's families go ahead. They come to a hotel location. We have some seminars that they listen to. So we do everything from planning out a full day of breakout sessions, seminars, to figuring out when you're going to have coffee, to having sponsorships to go ahead and help put on the production and the event. So it's about week-long event that we go ahead and put on, and that's what I regularly help plan.
That's a lot of work, a week-long event.
Yes. Yes, it is.
So what behavioral design elements do you use when planning your events?
So I would say one of the most frequent things that I use, and it has a lot to do with choice architecture and planning an event, is really just choice overload and just cognitive overload. And I know that's been mentioned before on the show, on the podcast, but it is invaluable to really take a look at that and put it into your journey mapping process. And so that's usually the two things that I start out with when we're planning our event, whether it's figuring out what the schedule is, whether it's putting and assigning tables for vendors who are going to be there. It's just looking at the journey that attendees are going to take, exhibitors will take, staff will take, and figuring out how to limit as much overload as possible.
What guides your decisions around cognitive overload or choice overload?
I think the first thing that I go ahead and think through, and it's common if you hear it in behavioral science discussions, but it's friction. And not necessarily just in a bad way. A lot of times when I'm planning something, I go ahead and I take a moment to think through, okay, do I want people to stop and think through this process? Do I not want them to do that? Do I want to make it intuitive? Do I want to make it easy, no thought that's needed? Or do I need them to stop and focus for a moment? And that's usually how I begin my process here, is trying to understand that. Because at that point, it becomes an issue of removing barriers. How easy can we make something happen? For instance, if we have 3 different rooms where sessions are taking place, do I go ahead and I put signs there? Do I draw them a map so that they have it beforehand when they first arrive? Do I have it for their phone? So looking at things like that. Now, what if I need them to pick up a book that has some items they're going to vote on, and I need them to read through and take that time to review this so that they're aware and they don't say, well, you didn't tell me about this earlier. I'm going to look and say, okay, what barriers can I put in their way to help them take time, think through what they're doing, and help us through the process.
That's really interesting. Now, I specifically was interested to talk to you about gamification as well. Because in one of your recent articles, you say, and I quote here, "We have exchanged a thrilling user journey with a shiny badge that loses its luster over time." Can you expand on that? Why do you think so?
Yeah. So first off, to go ahead and see, and you'll hear one of my little ones coming down now, and they could tell you all about it. One moment is, it's okay, you'll enjoy it. One of the things that you'll go ahead and you'll have is, when you're looking at engagement with apps, design, and things like that, a lot of it is focused around points, badges, rewards. It's very much, we just want to keep you involved. Now, there are some who do a much better job of this. They go ahead and they focus on so many other things. But what we've done oftentimes is we just want people to keep coming back to use our app. We just want people to go ahead and play things. And so that's not always effective. We need to go ahead and think about, like I said, the whole journey of what we're doing. And so when you're looking at this, happen is, the first thing is, this is an event. We want people to interact. We want their time to be worth it. We don't want to just have them come and say the best part of the event was that you got a bag with a bunch of pens in it. Mm-hmm. And so what we're doing is, when we're looking at this event, when we're looking at removing barriers, when we're taking all of it in, we first have to look and say, okay, why is somebody coming to our event? It's not this automatically attractive thing that they just can't resist, because there's so many different decisions we have to make. So when we're coming to an event, I think it's really important, especially when we're talking about gamification, to go ahead. It's not just about making it engaging for a moment, giving them a reward, and that's a great event. It's about, what are they leaving with at the end of their journey? Once they're leaving here, what makes them say, that was well worth my time. I want to go back through the process.
I love this point. I think we often overlook, the whole picture, right? We concentrate on the moment where the event is happening and leave everything else to chance, basically. I mean, I'm seeing more of a conscious and meaningful approach to pre and post event stages as of recently. And I think pandemic kind of helped with that, because a lot of things were redesigned, reprocessed, and there were a lot of discussions around that particular topic. Well, what can we do pre-event and post-event so that it's a holistic experience, not just not focusing just on what is happening with attendees on site, but also before and after the event. And I think it's really vital, because a lot of things are happening right, before and after the event, that actually impact the decision to attend, come back to the event.
Exactly. And I think a good example of this, and it plays on both right here, these ideas of kind of gamification or the whole journey, and also choice architecture. If you look at Disneyland's website, when you go there, the items that they have, it's not about us, it's not contact us, it's plan your visit, places to stay, things to do. Because Disneyland's thinking through it in very much what you're going to have to do, the pre, the during, and the after. All right, you need to plan. You need to know how much it's going to cost to come here. So you go onto that page of the website and it says, okay, how many people are coming? What days are you coming? Are you a resident of California and do you get a discount? And so they start to consider these things to help you figure that out. The next part of the process is, well, where are you going to stay? If you don't live, I used to live near Disneyland about 5 miles away. So for me, it was a bike ride over and that was good and great. But most people who go there don't have that. So now what they're doing is they're thinking about the entire time that they're going. What do these people have to consider? What's going to be an obstacle in their way? How can we make it easier for them to go with us? Which is the reason why they have hotels there on the site. It makes it easier for them to make the decision. But part of it is now you have the fun experience. It doesn't just end at, hey, we've given you a hotel. We've given you a themed hotel. We have the characters there to greet you. You're going to have breakfast with them. So you have the whole experience of being at Disneyland, even when you've gone back to your room.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I do agree. Another quote from your article: gamification is a simple fix that tries to sweeten a poor tasting experience. And I think that is quite often the case with gamification at events. So my question is, what is your perspective on using gamification at events going forward, in the future? What can we do to make it work like it is supposed to do?
Yeah. Well, I think to help illustrate my thinking and how I think we should move forward with this, one of the common things that we do with gamification, especially at an event, so often it's limited to, do we have a fun icebreaker? This is an actual game that we do where we say, okay, let's go ahead and just get a little piece of paper. Let's just figure out, answer some quick questions, put it in a bin later for a raffle. That's gamification at an event. Now let's get back to the whole event. Let's go ahead and have our speakers. And so the first thing that you have to realize is and granted, not everybody loves games. So you can't go ahead and force somebody to enjoy all these things, but the whole process it can be a fun event. If you can't picture that for your event, then I think that's a problem first and foremost. But I think one of the things that we can really go ahead and do is look at the person as an individual user and go, okay, how do we, and this comes from playing a lot of games here, so I grew up doing that frequently, but it's almost in a sense, what is this person's role? How can we make them better at it at the end of it all? So again, if we're looking at the journey, let's go ahead and say we have something like Nudge Stock coming up. It is a perfect example of this concept I want to do, and I would like to see more. If you look at Nudge Stock's example, and it's going to happen as of when we're recording this, but it may have already happened. But if you get the chance to look at their schedule, it's brilliant. They have 3 different colors for each session. And what they've done is they've said it's focusing on 3 different topics.
Right.
Many different speakers, but one is behavioral science and innovation. Another is climate change. Another is vaccines and hesitancy. So if you, as a person, it's a long event, all in one day, my goodness, your brain implodes after being a part of it. But if you really want to go ahead and look at climate change and how to use behavioral science in that, they've made it clear. They've said, here's the roadmap, here's the color, and these are the times that these people are going to speak at that. So by the end of it, you leave Nudge Stock going, I have left knowing more about behavioral science and how to use it with climate change. So what they've done is they've given someone the opportunity to specialize through their event, to come out the other end more equipped on that subject. And so it's really this idea of giving somebody this role. So when we're looking at events, we oftentimes go, I have a smattering of people. We're just going to throw them in. Which times are good? Who's my prime speaker? Who am I giving the biggest honorarium to? We'll put them at the prime time.
Yes.
When really we should maybe be looking at, well, do we have one topic this year? Do we have two? Do we have three? Can I orient three different paths for people to go ahead and take in this? Now that I've done that, do we have networking times? Do they align with these three different paths that we have? So looking at it like that, and again, it's very much looking at the journey someone's taking. Going, okay, we've started at this point. Where do I want them to end up in the end? And it's storytelling is really what it comes down to. Because if you come in with that mindset, what you've done is you've prepared a person to say, okay, today when I go to Nudgestock, I'm going to have these questions. I'm going to come ready to think about this, to consider this. Maybe I've done some reading beforehand. And so again, it already helps the person on their own time prepare pre, and then after the fact, know what they want to do leaving the event.
Right. I love so many points, starting from, there are so many lessons that are there for event professionals in Nudgestock. So even if we leave out the content, itself, which is great, always great from the behavioral science perspective, right? From the event design standpoint, there are so many good things that they are doing. Like you mentioned, color coding those topics, right? I notice it right away. And I think it makes it easier for people, again, to notice it, to process it, and to make a decision. What do I want to watch this time, right? Which sessions I want to attend. And I also love this point of aligning different elements of the agenda. Like if my networking activities or if my gamification is aligned with the overall objective or the content of my event, right? I think this is something that we need to consider more seriously. Right. Well, and my other question is, because I also read your blog on designing with intention and emotions in mind. And I think it comes back to what we've just discussed, but in a way. But I think designing with intention and emotions in mind, it's what is kind of happening in the virtual events environment, or what we need to be happening in the virtual events environment. How would you answer your own question from that article, which is, how do we convey emotion and intention as accurately as possible in this digital age? How would you answer that question, but in events context?
Yeah. I think it's the same for both, whether it's physical or digital. And I think the first thing is really transparency and honesty, especially when we're coming to a project, especially digital, because digital is really hard because there's a screen between you and you can't read a person's body language as well sometimes. Some people have really grown to do it well in the way we did when we were wearing masks frequently. You could start to read the eyes well. But I think the first thing is honesty, is being open, being clear with the people you're dealing with. So often we go ahead and we see renewals for subscriptions and they say, well, this is the price to renew. Then we go ahead and we go on and say, I don't want to. And they say, okay, well, actually, this is the price to renew. Well, that's really unfair. That's really dishonest. And not only that, it's left a sour taste in the mouth. Now, when we look at that with events, when we're looking at pricing, or especially when we start to go ahead and look at how we're planning out the event, giving people as much information about it as possible. Most of these events take place during the workday. And so if we don't have a schedule, if we don't have information available for them, if we don't tell them if things will be recorded, if we don't tell them that slide decks will be available, these are questions that start to get asked during the session. Okay, well now, and this comes back to intentionality, is now we're distracting them from what they should be focusing on. And I think that's a big part of it. When we're in a digital and physical event, what we hope for is the undivided attention of our attendee. So often we leave out information. We use platforms that are very clunky because they're cheap, and we use them so that we can just get the event put on. And we assume that people will still be able to be focused. But if you have your phone and you're sitting at an event and it keeps buzzing and buzzing and buzzing, you know how easy it is to become distracted. So what happens when you go ahead and you use a platform that isn't intuitive, is really hard to go ahead and navigate for a person? Well, if you're going to use it, you better give them some clear notes of, by the way, if you haven't used this, here's the navigation. You're going to stay in this area frequently, and it's going to help you to know that. We're sending out some books to review for our event coming up, and regularly we have them each and every year. Well, this year what we've done is we're sending them out a couple weeks before, and we said, you're going to still get a physical one. It's smaller to help save on costs because printing costs a lot of money. But here's this. It still has all the same information and more. Please review it. We want you to review it. We don't go ahead and just leave them going, well, this year's book is smaller. And then they go, well, why is that? Well, we just had to save on costs. You should understand. Well, no, we want them to understand our process. We want them to know why we did it. And so it's making these decisions, being honest and transparent, considering the work the person has to do to enjoy your event.
Right. That's fantastic point. All right. And I have a couple of final questions for you. I always ask my guests to share any recommendations for, books or resources from behavioral science field or psychology. What would you recommend to event professionals to read or to check out?
I would say a couple things to go ahead and look at. One, I'm not sure it's been mentioned before, but is What Wants and Can't Tell You by Melina Palmer. For those who are really just getting started with behavioral science and want to see how it can be used, and especially want a guide, it's a great book. It's very simple, very easy to read, great as a resource to just go back to when you're not sure about different terms and whatnot. That's a great one. If you want to go ahead and dive into choice architecture and see how you can use that in your event, it's a little harder, but the book Elements of Choice by Eric Johnson is fantastic.
And he's going to speak at Nudgestock, right?
He is, and it will be great and wonderful. But he does everything from covering how menus are designed and the prime area for reading on your menu to talking about how an airplane cockpit, how all of the design of it made the difference between Sully Sullenberger landing on that river and not. And it is fascinating to read that book and understand just how much these designs influence our life.
That's great. Thank you for those recommendations. I'm sure that they're just perfect for, any professional, basically, not only event professionals, right? Okay. And so, what, in your opinion, is one behavioral science or psychology insight that event professionals should apply immediately?
I would say two, because they pair together. And so two I would encourage people to look up is primacy and recency effect. And what they are essentially is the primacy effect and recency effect. The way they work is when you're given quite a bit of information, you often remember the beginning information very well and the last bit of information that you get. Everything in between is often lost in translation. It's forgotten because there's so much to remember. So when you're looking at that, especially when it comes again to architecture and designing choices people have, the more options that you have in one decision, the harder it will be for somebody to remember, the harder it will be for them to make a decision. I mean, think about if we're trying to figure out the best way to invest money, there's thousands upon thousands. So you probably just remember the first and last stock somebody told you to put money in. You don't know why, you just put it there. And so it's powerful. It makes a big difference in how people make their decisions, and understanding it can help you quite a bit.
I love it. That's a great insight. And so talking about the last thing to remember, right? I always ask my guests to complete a sentence for me because the podcast title is What If I Told You? How would you complete this sentence with one takeaway relevant to our conversation today? What if I told you?
If I told you the smallest choices will make the biggest change?
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you for taking your time, for sharing your perspective on so many things. Basically, we covered a lot of aspects, a lot of concepts, I would say, gamification and choice architecture and designing with intention and recency bias. And there is so much to learn from this conversation alone. I really appreciate your time and sharing these insights with us today. I invite everyone to connect with Timothy on LinkedIn and check his fantastic articles. All the links will be in the show notes, as well as all the resources that we mentioned. I will link to those as well. Thank you for tuning in to What If I Told You, the Event Psychology podcast. For more brain science insights and for this episode recap, I invite you to join the Event Psychology Club. Until next time, bye-bye.